We are in the middle of Torah Yud Zayin in Likutei Moharan called VaYehi Merikim Sakehem, and we're almost at the end of part 6, Ot Vav, in this Torah. And Rabbi Nachman in this Torah is explaining to us how tzedakah, giving charity to more people, the more people that you give tzedakah to, the better. Or if you give tzedakah to a Torah scholar, someone who's devoted themselves in their life to acquiring more Torah knowledge, to expanding their higher consciousness, their Torah consciousness, and their divine consciousness. When you give tzedakah to such a soul, and such a soul is considered a collective soul, he is including within his soul many souls. It's as if you give tzedakah to many, many people. And Rabbi Nachman is explaining to us in this Torah how by giving tzedakah to many, many people, or giving tzedakah to one person whose soul includes many people, and then it's as if you gave tzedakah to many people, that will bring us, and Rabbi Nachman gives us the formula, how that will bring us through all the steps that are needed in order to properly receive the light of the tzaddik, receive the higher consciousness that the tzaddik is constantly bringing for us, giving to us, drawing to within us, to be able to receive that deeper understanding that the tzaddik gives to us, which brings us to experience more fear and more love of Hashem, more awe of Hashem and more love of Hashem. That's what this Torah is. So these are the two ends of the formula. How tzedakah brings us through all of these steps that will bring us at the end, and the culmination of all these steps is to experience more awe of Hashem and more love of Hashem. And that's the light that we receive from the tzaddik. And how does that work? So Rabbi Nachman explains to us that when you give tzedakah to many, many people, or to one person that is including many people, and therefore it's as if you gave tzedakah to many, many people. So between the person that gave the tzedakah and the many people that received the tzedakah, there is a field of energy that is created, a field of love energy, of friendly energy, a peaceful energy, which completely dissolves any of the opposing energies. Anything that is on the opposite side of love is melting away in this environment, in this field that has of energy that has been created between the person who gave tzedakah and all of those people that received tzedakah. So that love energy is now spread out. And because he gave tzedakah to many, many people, so that field of energy is now expanded, filling up a huge amount of space. It could be that it's filling up the whole world, right? And that love energy that is filling up this space melts away all of the energy of separation, the energy of anger, the energy of arguments and frustration and hatred. All of that dissipates. And all of that is considered, that Rabbi Nachman calls it metaphorically, he said it's compared to a stormy wind, okay? Which is really when you have an interference in the environment which does not allow for a sound to travel and be heard over a greater distance, right? We know that when there is a stormy wind, even if two people are standing really close to each other, one cannot hear the other person. Sound cannot travel. The words cannot travel in a climate, a stormy climate, in an area where there is a lot of interference. This is also why, and this is, the Rabbi Nachman gives us a mashal, he gives us a way of understanding this from nature, that we know that when you have a stormy wind, then the sound waves cannot travel peacefully. But there's a lot deeper ideas that are hidden in this concept. And this is a concept that Rabbi Nachman explains in other places in the Likutei Moharan. He brings a pasuk that says, Adabera na shalom bach. I will speak peace unto you. And Rabbi Nachman brings proof that speech or completed speech, perfected speech, not just any speech, completed and perfected speech is dependent on the midah of shalom, on the energy of peace. And that's why he says that in order for a person to daven to Hashem, to pray to Hashem, you need perfected speech. The whole idea of prayer is a word speaking that are completely they're saturated with holy spiritual energy. And when those words are filled to the brim with this life energy, this energy of consciousness, of holy awareness, what's called dveikut, then the words in our prayer affect the greatest change in the most powerful and the most sweetest, most wonderful way. And so for davening, for praying to Hashem, we want our words to be complete. That's why also the Chafetz Chaim speaks about how the perils and the negative effects of speaking Lashon Hara, negative talk. He says how a person's prayers are not answered when a person uses their speech, their power of speech, in negative ways, in speaking slander and speaking negativity. And the reason is because a person is corrupting their power of speech. He's corrupting his words. And then when he comes and he speaks to Hashem and he prays to Hashem with on that same level of speech, then those words are not effective. Those words are not able to affect the change that have to have the desired effect. And so in order to pray, in order to daven and speak to Hashem in a way that those words are effective and they cause the change that we want, that we are seeking, we want our words to be complete, to be perfected, to be whole. And Rabbi Nachman says that's dependent on the midah, the energy of peace. Speaking perfect words is dependent on those words being infused and being in an environment of shalom. And so he says, Rabbi Nachman, in that other Torah, he says that's why a person who has the level of peace, of shalom, of holy peace, holy shalom, wholeness, completeness, such a person knows all the words of the world. Such a person includes within him all the words of the world. He's a master of speech. So all the words are included within him. And so definitely he's able to daven. And when he davens, when he prays to Hashem, his words, every word that he says, as he says, Rifa'enu, as he says, Hashem, heal us, those words cause the healing. And so this is something also we touched upon a little bit in the previous Torah. And this is also something, an idea, that concept that we see very similar idea here in this Torah. How the words, the speech, in order for the words of the Mordechai, we spoke about the tzaddik, who is the opposing power, the power that uproots idol worship, and the power of holiness, which uproots all of the idol worshippers' corrupted belief systems. That power is called Mordechai. It's called Ish Yehudi. And when he speaks those perfect words, those words of truth, words of Hashem, words of Torah, in order for those words to really be effective and for those words to resonate throughout the whole world, even to the farthest reaches, the darkest corners of the world, where those Jewish souls were lost, you need a peaceful environment. You need this energy of peace, of shalom. And that's what tzedakah causes. The tzedakah has this effect. And so when you give tzedakah to many people, or to a person that includes many people, and the energy of peace is expanded to fill this whole huge space between all of these people, and so now the words of Mordechai are heard in all the countries of the world, right? His words is heard b'chol medinot, as the pasuk in Esther says, in all the countries of the world, in the farthest reaches. And not just heard, those words are not just heard, but those words are so powerful, they are so concrete, that it's as if they've been inscribed in the reality. They've been inscribed in the air, in the environment. And they've been inscribed in the environment even in the farthest reaches, in the farthest corners, in the darkest corners of the world, and even in those books of the other religions, of the idol worshippers, even in the books of the corrupted belief systems of the idol worshippers, those words of Mordechai have an effect, and they've been inscribed in those books. And what it comes from that is that the Jewish souls that were lost in those dark corners, in those dark places of the world, of the 70 nations of the idol worshippers, because they have a Jewish soul at the core, that will cause them to remember who they really are, remember their identity, remember their tremendous significance, where they come from, that the Jewish soul was together, was almost a partner. We can be considered partners with Hashem in creating the world. That's what it says, the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim that we brought, right? Hema ayoshvim neta'im im hamelech. What was the pasuk that we said? Hema yotzrim yoshve neta'im im hamelech b'mlachto. Yeah, pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. These are the architects who dwell in the fields together with the king in his work. What's his work? The medrash that we brought from Bereshit Rabbah, that Hashem consulted the Jewish souls when he created the world. And so these Jewish souls they remember their identity, they remember their significance, they remember where they came from. And that brings them to grieve about their situation of being so far from home, being so far from who they belong, from the people they belong to, and from being so far from the palace of the king, right? They are sons of the king, and they're so far, and that causes this awakening. It causes them to come back to Hashem. It causes them to convert back to Judaism. And what that brings about is a completion, a wholeness to the Mizbeach, the Malchut, and the table, the holy table, meaning that when we eat, now the meal that we're eating is complete, it's perfected, it's holy, it's connected to Hashem. It's as if we're sitting at the table of Hashem, eating our meal. And that food nourishes the soul, and the animal part of the person, the physicality of the person, is weakened and becomes subservient to the soul. And so it's no longer blocking the soul from shining in its greatest state. Okay, because now the soul is nourished instead of the animal self. The higher self, the godly self, is now nourished. And so the godly self is able to shine through. And so that brings to what's called, Rabbi Nachman calls it Hitromemut HaSechel, the higher expanded consciousness. And when a person is experiencing that, he's able to see and experience and recognize the light of the tzaddik. And when he can experience and recognize the light of the tzaddik, so the consciousness that the tzaddik is constantly working to bring within us for us to experience, this person is now able to experience it. He's able to understand those messages from the tzaddik. The light of the tzaddik is able to feel it. And what's that consciousness? It's the consciousness, the awareness, the knowledge, and the understanding of why Hashem created the world, the purpose that Hashem had in creating the world, the intention that Hashem had in creating the world, which is the tremendous pride that he prides himself with the Jewish people. And we spoke about how this is the aspect of the tefillin. Your splendor, your glory is upon you. And in the tefillin of Hashem, in Hashem's tefillin, it says, who is like your nation, Israel, a unique nation in all the land. And so it's the pride that Hashem is priding himself with the Jewish people. And now that this person is able to receive this awareness, this understanding, this experience in his heart, experiencing it, that the tzaddik is bringing to him, that causes the feeling, understanding and feeling and experiencing awe of Hashem and love of Hashem. Awe of Hashem, because when the tefillin is revealed, so everyone feels awe. When the king is revealed among his nation, wearing his royal clothing, with his royal entourage, and the officers and the advisors of the king, and the trumpets, and the chariots, and the army, and the celebrations, all of that, so people feel the awe of the king in front of them. And so that's the tefillin, gives us this experience. The pride of the king. When the pride of the king is revealed, when the splendor of the king is revealed, everyone feels that awe. And when everyone is feeling that awe, and everyone is in the celebration of the kingship of the king, so then the king feels tremendous love, tremendous happiness, tremendous fulfillment and joy with his creation, with what he did, with the world that he created, with his subjects, with his nation. And then whatever it is that they wish for, he tells them, come, tell me, share with me what you want, and it is yours. I will give it to you. And so that's the love that Hashem is shining towards us, the love that Hashem is shining upon us. And so yesterday we were speaking about how Rabbi Nachman gave us a few hints, a few points, a few psukim that are pointing to the concepts in this Torah that we spoke about up until now. The idea of how the Mizbeach is completed through the righteous converts, and that happens, the righteous converts, we come back to Judaism through the writing of Hashem, right? The writing by the hand of Hashem, which we spoke about, that means the words of the Mordechai, which are inscribed in the reality, like writing, like something that is written. Okay, and then Rabbi Nachman spoke about in Aleinu L'Shabeach, L'Taken Olam B'Malchut Shaddai V'Chol B'nei Masai Yikiru B'Shmecha. Tikkun Olam, according to the Torah, Tikkun Olam is about bringing the consciousness of Shaddai to the whole world. Shaddai represents two words, Sheyesh Dai, that there is enough, that Hashem is enough. When everyone recognizes Hashem is enough, then that uproots and dissolves any of the idol worship and idol worshippers' corrupted belief systems, because there's nothing to seek anywhere else. You have everything here now with Hashem. Okay, and Hashem is more than enough. There's nothing that you need, there's nothing lacking. And so that's the consciousness of Sheyesh Dai Be'elokuto, that there is enough in Hashem's godliness, L'chol B'riah, for everyone of in existence, for all of humanity. And that's really what Tikkun Olam is. That's the Takin Olam B'Malchut Shaddai. And then everyone will call out to Hashem. Everyone will turn to Hashem. And even those Jewish souls that were embedded in the darkness of the 70 nations of idol worshippers will be returned to Hashem. That's L'Hafnot Elecha Kol Rishei Aretz, because those Jewish souls are found among the Rishei Aretz. They're embedded in the wicked of the earth, in those idol worshippers' families, in those nations, and they are now being turned back towards Hashem. L'Hafnot Elecha Kol Rishei Aretz, to turn all the wicked of the earth towards you. Okay, Yakiru v'yid'u kol yoshvei tevel, Rabbi Nachman says, so this part of Aleinu L'Shabeach, that we say all the inhabitants of the world will recognize and know. What is that recognizing and knowing? So says Rabbi Nachman, Zeh b'chinat shleimut hadat shenaseh al yedei zeh kanal. This is the aspect of the perfection and the completion of consciousness that happens through all of these steps that we spoke about in the formula. They will recognize and know. Kol yoshvei tevel, all the inhabitants of the earth. So now it says Rabbi Nachman, and this is what we're up to inside. He brings us another pasuk from Eov. V'zeh v'haya shaddai b'tzarecha v'chesef tu'afot lach, says Rabbi Nachman. The pasuk says that Shaddai, again the same name, shall be your treasure. V'chesef tu'afot lach, and silver will fly into your hand. Tu'afot will fly into your hand. So says Rabbi Nachman, Sha'alideh b'chinat kesef tu'afot, היינו בחינת הון יוסיף רעים רבים, שעל ידי זה נעשה אוויר מעופף, שנזדכך האוויר כנ"ל, על ידי זה נעשה בחינת שדי, היינו תשובה וגרים, כי שדי הוא בחינת תשובה כנ"ל. Beautiful. So says Rabbi Nachman, through the kesef tu'afot, through the silver or the money flying into your hand, that represents the tzedakah that you're giving and spreading tzedakah throughout the whole world, through that, And why is it called flying into your hand? Right? V'kesef tu'afot lach. The literal translation of the words is that the silver is flying for you. In that specific, in the context of that pasuk, it means that the money is flying to your hands. But the words in the pasuk just say the silver is flying to you. Why is silver flying to afotlach? Why is it flying for you? So Rabbi Nachman says that this idea of it flying, okay, he says that is what happens through the silver. Through the tzedakah, the environment is purified with this peaceful energy, and then the words are able to fly through the air without any interference. And that's what Rabbi Nachman says is alluded to in this pasuk. V'chesef, through the tzedakah, through the money, through the silver, tu'afot lach. Now the environment, the air is just flying without any interference. The words are able to fly through the environment without any blocks in the way. And then what comes from that is what is expressed in the first three words of the pasuk. V'haya Shaddai b'tzarecha. Shaddai will be your treasure, meaning that the consciousness of sheyesh dai be'elokuto, the consciousness of Shaddai, which is all the good returning to Hashem, returning to its rightful place by the Malchut, which is, as we said, that the Jewish souls converting back to Judaism and recognizing that there is enough by Hashem, which is, we said, Shaddai, and that's the Teshuvah, returning of all those sparks of holiness to their source. That will happen through, as we said, through the charity, through the silver that causes the environment, the words to fly through the air easily. Okay, and that concludes part 6 of this Torah. And let's begin Od Zayin. ודע שלפעמים כשהרע רואה שהטוב משתוקק וממשיך עצמו ורוצה לחזור למקומו, אזי הם מתגברים על הטוב ביותר ומביאים אותו לתוך העלמה יתרה. דהיינו שמביאים אותו לתוך פנימיות מחשבתם. דהיינו שמתחילים לחשוב מחשבות על זה הטוב. ועל ידי זה מכניסים את הטוב בתוך העלם והסתר יותר בפנימיות מחשבתם. And so now Rabbi Nachman is going to go back. Let's go back and take one of the concepts that we spoke about earlier, and he's going to add an understanding, add a point to that which we spoke about. And what we spoke about was how you have these Jewish souls lost among the 70 nations of idol worshippers, and we spoke about how that happens. It's all about all the good that the 70 nations stole from the Jewish people, and we gave different examples of how they stole good, and they denied good from the Jewish people, or they denied the Jewish people from creating good and from experiencing good. And good is not just physical good, we're speaking about spiritual good as well. And then that good that is denied by the 70 nations is denied from the Jewish people, then it's swallowed up by the 70 nations, and those are those sparks of holiness, or those Jewish souls lost among them. But Rabbi Nachman says that sometimes that good that is swallowed by the 70 nations, sometimes the bad, the evil, those wicked that are surrounding that good, they recognize the good, and they don't want it to go back to Judaism. They don't want it to go back to the Jewish people. And so they put it into their head, they really think deeply about it, and they fill up their mind trying to figure out and try to see how they can swallow it up even more, and how they can deny the Jewish people from receiving that good back, and how they can block that good and embed it in the darkness even more, so that it's blocked even more from ever being able to return back to the Jewish people. And because they have filled up the innermost chambers of their consciousness, pnimiyut machshavtam, which is a word and expression that Rabbi Nachman brings in a few places, and it's referring to a certain state of consciousness, a certain depth in a person's thinking. It's not just outside quick thought, quick thinking. It's something that is deeply embedded in their thinking, in their consciousness. A pnimiyut machshavtam, the innermost chambers of their thinking, of their mind, of their consciousness. And with that, they put their focus on that good that was swallowed up by them. And they don't want it to be freed. They don't want it to go back to the Jewish people. And so by doing that, they cause that good to be covered up and concealed with more layers of darkness. Okay? And so this is also a situation, because if you remember earlier throughout this Torah, I mentioned how sometimes these Jewish souls could be lost by the 70 nations for many hundreds of years. These could be sparks of holiness were lost by them for thousands of years. How is that? Why did they never come back? One of the reasons is expressed by this point, this concept that Rabbi Nachman is explaining here, that they recognized that was a spark of holiness, there was a good there. They put it in the innermost chambers of their consciousness and embedded it deeper into the darkness of that nation of idol worshippers, right? And they concealed it in this way. They concealed that spark of holiness. They concealed that Jewish soul with more layers of blocks, of walls, more layers of darkness. But Rabbi Nachman says that that's all futile, right? In the end, it all comes back to the Jewish people. So maybe in that generation itself will not be able to come back to the Jewish people, because it was embedded deeper into the darkness of that corrupted belief system, into the darkness of that nation from the 70 nations of idol worshippers. So maybe that specific, in that generation, maybe that Jewish soul will not come back, but his children will come back, or his grandchildren will come back. Okay? Because now, since they embedded it in the innermost chambers of their consciousness, they embedded that good, that spark of holiness, that Jewish soul in the innermost chambers of their consciousness. We know in Kabbalah that children are born when parents conceive a child. So the seed that is drawn from the father is drawn from the innermost part of his consciousness, okay, from the chokhmah. Okay, and so when these from these people from the 70 nations, when they embedded that spark of holiness and they put it in the innermost chambers of their consciousness and they concealed it with more layers, so maybe on that generation it was not able to come back to Judaism, but because it was now embedded in the innermost chambers of their consciousness, in the pnimiyut machshavtam, so that will be drawn into the children that they conceive, that they give birth to. And those children will go back to Judaism. Those children will have an easier time, an easier way to get back to Judaism, and you see that as well. And so then that good, as a result, that good will emerge through the offspring which these people, these Gentiles will bear. These goyim will have, right? Why? Because it was hidden. It was those sparks of holiness were hidden and concealed in the inner recesses of their soul, which is where children are born from. That's where the seed is drawn from. Well, the life energy in the seed that allows for the child to be born from that is drawn from that place in the person's consciousness. And therefore the good emerges in the seed that produces their offspring, their children. And at that point, by the children, the negativity in their bodies is not strong enough to overpower the spark of holiness, their Jewish soul. It's not strong enough to overpower it and to conceal it. And so therefore, in that next generation, the Jewish soul within them will drag them back to home, back to their source, back to the Jewish people. And from there, that's how, and they become converts, righteous converts. Now Rabbi Nachman gives us another pasuk in Tehillim that says that Hashem will count when he inscribes the nations. Hashem yispor bichtov amim, ze yulad sham sela. And this one will be born there, Selah. Hashem will count. Hashem yispor bichtov amim. Hashem will count when he writes or inscribes the nations. Ze yulad sham Selah. And then this one was born there, Selah. So what is that referring to? What is that alluding to? Bichtov, when Hashem inscribes the nations, what is that speaking about? זה בחינות הטוב שיוצא על ידי בחינת הכתב כנ"ל. וזהו, זה יולד שם סלע, שנתלבש הטוב בהילודים ויוצא על ידם. וזה שפירוש רש"י, זה יולד שם שהם ישראל שנטמעו בעקום. היינו בחינת הטוב הכבוש אצלם, שוב בחינת חלקי נשמות ישראל. So Rabbi Nachman says that that which was inscribed among the nations is referring to the good that comes out of the nations, that is returned from the nations because of that which was inscribed in their books. Okay? And then, the end of the pasuk, Ze yulad sham Sela, this one was born there. Sela is referring to the good which was born in their children, and that good is so powerful in the next generation that the negativity that is surrounding it is not strong enough to hold it back, and instead the good within them, the Jewish soul within them, drags and it pulls and is pulled back and drawn back to Judaism and converts to Judaism. And that's beautiful according to how Rashi explains that pasuk in Tehillim. And we see many times how Rashi, in his explanation, is hidden deepest secrets of the Torah. Many times Rashi says things that are exactly what the Zohar says on that pasuk. Even though Rashi didn't have, in his time and his place, they didn't have the Sefer of the Zohar. But he had such a tremendous level of Ruach HaKodesh that many times you see in the words that he uses in his commentary, in his explanations, in his Pirush, that the deepest secrets of the Torah are alluded to in those words. And here, this is a beautiful example. What does Rashi say on those words in Tehillim? Ze yulad sham Sela. This one was born there, Sela. Rabbi Nachman says it's referring to those Jewish souls that now in the next generation that were born among those 70 nations, they're returned to Judaism. They convert to Judaism. Rashi says, Ze yulad sham is referring to Shehem Yisrael Shenitmeu Ba'akum. It's referring to the Jews who have become assimilated among the Gentiles, among the 70 nations of idol worshippers. Hainu bechinat hatov hakavush etzlam. It's referring to, it's alluding to the good that was swallowed up among them, shu bechinat chelkei nishmot Yisrael, which are those Jewish souls that were held captive among those 70 nations. And so you see that Rashi says that it's referring to those Jewish souls that were assimilated or held captive or swallowed up among the 70 nations of idol worshippers. And so that's the deeper meaning of this pasuk. And that's exactly what we're saying here. That happens through bichtov, through that which was inscribed among the 70 nations in their books, which comes about, as we said, because of the tzedakah. And then says Rabbi Nachman, וזה בחינת לא ישכב עד יאכל טרף, זה בחינת שלמות המזבח כנ"ל, ודם חללים ישתה, ותרגומו ונכסה עממיה יראת, היינו בחינת גרים הנ"ל. וזהו ונכסה עממיה, היינו בחינת הטוב שנתכסה אצל העכו"ם שהביאו אותו בהלם והסתר בפנימיות. So the pasuk that we also mentioned earlier in this Torah, the pasuk that Bilam says, the prophecy of Bilam about the Jewish people, that the Jewish nation does not lie down to sleep. That's a simple understanding. One of the understandings of the pasuk is, and not the simple understanding, but one of the understandings is referring to that we don't go to sleep until we say Kriyat Shema. But the literal definition, literal translation, is that the Jewish nation does not lie down until he eats his teref. We spoke about teref a couple times at the beginning of the Torah. Teref is his prey. Okay? And so Rabbi Nachman says, and the end of the pasuk is, V'dam chalalim yishtem, and he drinks the blood of his kill. So he doesn't lie down until he eats his prey, and he drinks the blood of his kill. And on those words, and he drinks the blood of his kill, the Targum, Onkelos, translates it that the possessions of the nation, he inherits the possessions of the nations. So Rabbi Nachman says, Lo yishkav ad yochal teref. He won't lie down. The nation of Israel doesn't lie down until it eats its prey. What is that referring to? We spoke about how the Mizbeach is called toref, the predator that takes the prey. And so, Lo yishkav ad yochal teref, he doesn't lie down until he eats his prey. It's referring to the holy predator, which is the aspect of Binyamin. We spoke about how the Mizbeach, the deeper, the Kabbalistic meaning of the Mizbeach being in the land in Eretz Yisrael that was appropriated, that belonged to the Shevet Binyamin, and that's the aspect of Malchut. And so the Mizbeach is the Malchut, it's the holy predator, and so the Jewish nation doesn't lie down until it eats its prey. That's alluding to the wholeness, the perfection of the Mizbeach. The holy predator is perfected, is completed. And how does that happen? That happens when the possessions of the other nations he inherits, which is referring to the Jewish, the Jewish souls that are converting back to Judaism from among the 70 nations, and so those possessions of the 70 nations we are inheriting. Okay, and that causes the that causes that the holy predator is come to a state of perfection. The Mizbeach, the Malchut, has come to a state of perfection. The possessions of the nations he will inherit. That's the good, says Rabbi Nachman. That's the good which was hidden, which was held captive, embedded in the darkness of the 70 nations of idol worshippers. שהביאו אותו בהלם והסתר בפנימיות מחשבתם, כנ"ל שיוצא על ידי זרע ילודים ונעשים גרים, ועל ידי זה נשלם המזבח כנ"ל, which was hidden, which was concealed in their inner recesses of their thought, of their soul, of those 70 nations, right? And because of that, it was born. That good was born in their children, and now in their children, the negativity of the surrounding is not as strong. The negativity of their body, born to those idol worshiper parents, is not strong enough to hold back the good of their soul. And that Jewish soul is able to be freed from that darkness and is able to return to the Jewish people, to convert back to Judaism and complete the Mizbeach, to perfect the Mizbeach, to bring the Malchut, to bring the holy predator to its state of perfection. And that causes, as we said, the holy table, eating in a holy way that nourishes the soul, that nourishes the holy consciousness, and that brings us to be able to experience the light of the tzaddik, and that allows us to experience through the light of the tzaddik and through the consciousness that the tzaddik gives us, that the tzaddik is taught us, and is able to bring us to experience deeper and greater awe of Hashem and love of Hashem. And so that concludes Ot Zayin, part 7 of the Torah. We'll begin with Hashem, the next Ot, part 8 of the Torah in the next Shir.